The Jaguars' rebuild is at a breaking point. I'm Gabe. Welcome back to Franchise Tagged. Today, I'm going to be going over the first part of a two-part mini video series on the Jacksonville Jaguars and kind of this new era that they're going through. Basically from 2021 to present, where they kind of shifted being that, mediocre, carried by their defense team of the 2010s, I guess. They were kind of only carried by their defense in that 1 year with Jacksonville, but anywho, the transition to this new era team that we've got right now, the main one obviously being Trevor Lawrence being added. But I'm just going to, in this video, go over kind of a recap of the series of events that have led us to where we are today, going into this next season and leading to these high expectations that a lot of people have for the Jaguars, and I guess kind of why those expectations are high. And then in part 2 of this video, Elijah, my co-host, is going to be going over the kind of more in-depth analytical stats that back up these claims that I'm making, as well as kind of looking forward to what we can expect from them going forward into 2024. We may even make that a third video. Maybe like I go over the situation, he goes over the stats, and then we both get together and go over what we expect for them going forward. So before we get into things, drop a like, comment down below, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let me know how you want us to organize this, and if you like this kind of format of me going over some part of it, him going over another part, rather than both of us in the same video. I personally think it kind of breaks it up a little bit and doesn't make super long videos, but in order to keep this one short and concise, I will jump straight in. So, in 2021, the Jaguars were handed the golden ticket with the first overall pick. Trevor Lawrence was a surefire home run. It was a guaranteed hit at quarterback, one of the biggest positions of need, and a position that the Jaguars needed just as much as any other team has ever. Gardner Minshew was all right, not good enough to carry a team. Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be QB Jesus, like I was saying. The Prince Who Was Promised is one of our favorite nicknames for him. The savior of football in Jacksonville. Shout out to draft day and such. Now he's coming up on the end of his rookie contract when most people would consider the kind of Super Bowl window of this age to be coming to a close, when you can have a cheap quarterback and surround them with a lot of talent with your money, rather than having to pay them and then hoping they can carry the lesser talent because you don't have the money to pay that talent, if that makes sense. Let's talk about the talent that was put around Trevor Lawrence and sometimes the lack thereof. In starting off with his rookie season, coming out of the draft, things were looking great. They had Urban Meyer as their head coach, and we know how that turned out. But at the time, if you can transport yourself back to just following the 2021 draft, there was talk of the Jaguars going worst to first in the South and just genuinely turning things around, making themselves great with this high pedigree coach, the quarterback Jesus, right? And then they also went and picked up Travis Etienne at the end of the first round and kind of added these two Clemson teammates who were really dynamic there and put them on the same team. And everybody was thinking, this is great. Nothing can go wrong. Until Urban Meyer sucked, and Travis Etienne had his foot injury that kept him out for the full year, and Trevor Lawrence had typical rookie QB mistakes that were not helped by the fact that he was dealing with Urban Meyer. So we're kind of just going to call the rookie season a wash. There was enough that went wrong in it that wasn't necessarily Trevor Lawrence's fault, that I think I'm going to put that past him. And this video isn't purely on Trevor Lawrence, but I do believe that this new era of Jaguars football does kind of revolve around him. He is the centerpiece for it all. And I think that if they do end up kind of being mediocre, it's blame is going to be placed on the coach more than it is on Trevor Lawrence, I think. The offseason after Lawrence's rookie year, after that 2022 season, 2021 season, the Jaguars had the first overall pick again. And then in free agency, they added Christian Kirk on what at the time was a head-scratchingly large deal, 4 years, $72 million, obviously half of Justin Jefferson's recently signed contract. So now it's not as much of an overpay, but for a slot receiver at the time, that was a bit of a reach in the paying department. But all things aside, rookie contract for your quarterback, talented slot receiver. Cool. They spent the first overall pick on a developmental edge rusher in Trayvon Walker, who has absolutely not shown that first overall potential through 2 seasons. but he can always turn things around. Like I said, he's developmental. When they picked him, we knew he was developmental. People were shocked that they were taking him because of how far off of being a polished prospect he was. And then later in that first round, they took Devin Lloyd, another talented player. But an off-ball linebacker in the first round, it isn't the craziest idea, and a lot of mocks had the Patriots actually getting Devin Lloyd. But when you have talented linebackers already, namely Foye Oluokun, who is one of the better inside linebackers, one of the tackle leaders every year, why you would take another one when you have so many other holes on that roster is kind of just an odd, puzzling move, at least to me. And I kind of lean taking receiver, but the 2022 receiving class wasn't particularly strong, and hindsight's 2020, so I'm not going to harken on this too much, but George Pickens would have been a better pick here at 27. I kind of had him, I was thinking that somebody should take him in the late first, early second, even though I wasn't, going deep diving any college players at that time. Whatever their move at 27, I think that going into the season without a bona fide dominant wide receiver one was just not a good plan to have. They had on that roster, their top two receivers were Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, and then behind those two, they had Marvin Jones, Tim Jones, and Jamal Agnew. So not a great receiving core for a quarterback who could have benefited a lot from that. And they did trade for Calvin Ridley, but he was suspended for the year for gambling. And it was a low risk move, but I was still high on that move, but we'll get into that momentarily when we get into this past season. In 2022, despite going into the season without that bona fide dominant wide receiver one, they won the AFC South. They did what I kind of expected them to do in 2021. They won a playoff game under their new head coach, Doug Peterson, who was worlds better than Urban Meyer. And they ended up losing to the Chiefs by 7 in the divisional round. But all things considered, losing to the Chiefs in the divisional round is a very impressive performance from a team that just came off having the first overall pick. So this was what I think many others believed to be the next step for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, and they were looking like they would be perennial contenders in an ever-weakening AFC South. This is a division that had aging talent on the Titans and Derrick Henry, who, well, for the past 4 years, everybody's been like, well, he's going to fall off eventually. And then just a kind of void of talent on the Texans and the same thing on the Colts. But, you know what happened with those teams. In the 2023 draft, the Jags had performed well enough to pick at the tail end of the first, which is a good and bad thing. It means that they were good the past season, so they could do it again, but they couldn't add more to the team that I didn't think kind of deserved to go, or not deserved, but I didn't think was of the caliber to go that far. They picked Anton Harrison at pick 27, and he had his struggles, but, rookie first-round offensive tackle that's a later first-round pick, you're going to have some struggles there. Going into the 2023 season, Calvin Ridley was reinstated, and ultimately he was just okay. He slightly outperformed Zay Jones' 2022 performance on a per-game basis, but ultimately his addition to the team wasn't enough to move the needle and help them go further, and it wasn't helped at all by the fact that C.J. Stroud popped off, Anthony Richardson joined the division, and Will Levis also joined the division. So all three other teams added good quarterbacks, good young quarterbacks. So this division just got infinitely more difficult compared to what it was just a year prior when they went to the playoffs. This past offseason, they let Calvin Ridley walk and signed Gabe Davis and drafted Brian Thomas Jr. If there was some question marks to Gabe Davis's game when it comes to the quarterback performance, then I would think that signing is maybe a little bit better. If he was on a team that didn't have, an MVP candidate for a quarterback, as Gabe Davis did in Buffalo, then I think that maybe, just maybe, there would be some room to grow. But I think, unfortunately, that Gabe Davis is just that one-trick pony of being tall, fast, going to go down the field, going to make some big plays, but doesn't have a perfect route tree and doesn't have perfect fundamentals. And I think that Brian Thomas Jr. having kind of the same criticisms as Gabe Davis is not a great thing when you think that Gabe Davis is probably going to be mentoring Brian Thomas Jr. But whatever the outcome, they did their best to surround Trevor Lawrence with weapons going into this next season. And that's kind of the end of the acquisitions, the talent that they've gone and surrounded Trevor Lawrence with. I didn't talk much about Travis Etienne, but when he did come back, he's been pretty electric when given the opportunities and when put into a good situation. Elijah's got a little bit more on him that he'll go over in the next video, so I don't really want to spend too much time on him, but we'll get into the actual performances. We're going to take a jump back to 2021 with back to that Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer situation. And with those two at the helm, they sucked. Their offense was anemic due to Meyer's lack of coaching prowess at the next level, and there was a significant void of talent for the Jaguars in general on offense. And they claimed the first overall pick again, and Urban Meyer was out of there. So that was a very quickly failed experiment, and that's 1 year down on Trevor Lawrence's cheap rookie deal. So one less year of contention. In 2022, they went and hired Doug Peterson, signed Christian Kirk, got Etienne back. This was their year to explode, and they did. They struggled early on, which I think can be chalked up to kind of a new quarterback coach duo with some new weapons around him and just kind of getting comfortable again after having a really bad year with Urban Meyer and that kind of messing with his confidence maybe a little bit too. They lost 6 of their first 8, so going into week 9, they were 6-2. 2-6. Backwards, they were not 6-2. But they put everything together in the later stages, winning 5 straight games, and of their final 9 games, they won 7 of them. So they had a really good end to the season. And their playoff win, versus the Chargers was kind of reminiscent of that. They struggled a lot early on. Trevor Lawrence threw 4 picks, but they had a huge comeback win in the second half. And whether or not that's because Brandon Staley doesn't know how to coach a game, that is purely spectacle, and nothing is confirmed. So whether or not it's actually the Jaguars good or whether it is the Chargers bad that got them that win, they did win that game. They came alive in the second half just like they did during the season. And then, like I said earlier, lost to the Chiefs by just 7 points. They were a really close game against the Chiefs. And heading into 2023, adding Calvin Ridley, they looked like this was their year. I was very high on them. I think back to our preseason predictions where I had them going 15-2. That was ambitious. That was a horrible prediction. And I will defend myself and say that I didn't actually go back through and fix any anomalies. I just kind of guessed each individual game and then went through and I was like, wow, 15-2. That's nice. That's high. But halfway through the season, they looked great. They started off hot. They won 8 of their first 11, and then they were the number 1 seed after those first 11 games, just to lose 5 of their last 6 and miss the playoffs. Completely missed the playoffs. And that kind of brings us to where we are now. After looking back at their acquisitions this past offseason and hoping for some development on the offensive line, I think that this year is definitely a big year for them. I don't know if it's make or break. I don't know if it's, win this year, blow it all up, get rid of Trevor Lawrence, get rid of Doug Peterson, and completely start fresh. I don't think it's that. I really don't think they're going to let Trevor Lawrence walk. But I do think that this is a very important year that they need to show that they can get back to that 2022 to 2023 kind of end of 2022, beginning of 2023 season where they were really strong, and not show that they will become that team at the end of 2023 that we saw losing a bunch of games. Again, let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see from Elijah in his next video. He'll take some of your comments and actually use them, because I don't know if he's going to record this before this gets posted. I'm not 100% sure. We haven't figured everything out yet, but definitely let me know what you want to see from him. Let me know your thoughts on what the Jaguars have done so far, this new era of Jacksonville football, and what you think they need to do to kind of get over the hump and kind of become a perennial contender like we thought they might be after their 2022 season. But that is all I got for y'all. Thank you for watching, and deuces.